And now, Frans Schepers, Managing Director of Rewilding Europe.
Yes.
The stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I don't speak Swedish, but I have a good translator, I've understood, so I hope to follow all the discussions today. I would like to start first with sort of warming up for all of you about Rewilding Europe, and then I'll continue with more of the backgrounds of our initiative. So could I have, please, the trailer? Thanks. Okay, thank you. Everybody awake, I hope. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Rewilding Europe, a very fresh and new initiative. Actually, we exist only half a year, but we had quite a long time in preparation of this initiative, so we had a bit of an incubation time. This works, yes. And my talk really is about, I think, for a lot of people, an eye-opener, rediscovering European nature, I've called it, because I think that's what it is. And what I would like to do is to explain you what the opportunity really is at this moment as we speak. I would like to explain to you the vision and approach of Rewilding Europe. I will take you on a little trip to Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, and show you some of the five first projects we are working on, which have just started, and also tell you a little bit about what are the three main cornerstones or components of Rewilding Europe. And then I would like to make a case for wildlife tourism or safari tourism in Europe, as I said, still at a very infant stage, I would say, in Europe, and then at the end draw some conclusions. So, when we talk about opportunity, you saw it in the trailer already. There is something happening at the European countryside, and a lot of people know it when they travel on holiday to France, Italy, Spain, but maybe even in Sweden you have experienced that there is urbanization going on. That's a worldwide process. It's happening everywhere and also in Europe. A lot of people think that Europe is built up and there is no nature left, but I think, and you saw some of the pictures already, that Europe has a lot to offer. This land abandonment is happening already for 10, 15, some areas 20 years, and a country like Portugal, 20% of its agriculture area has been abandoned already. It's expected that in 2020, 4 out of 5 Europeans live in urban areas, so it's a huge impact. And what is driving it? In fact, two different reasons that are driving this land abandonment. You see the green areas on the right side, on the top. It's young people that don't want to go out with sheep and goat into the mountains anymore. They want to go to city life and build relationships and study and have their iPhones and laptops and all of that. And of course also in a lot of marginal areas can't compete anymore with modern agriculture. And it's if you look at the history of Europe, a little bit longer than 100 years ago, Europe was expanding, population was expanding. People were moving to the United States, were moving to Australia. There was immigration, and also a lot of areas in Europe were being occupied by people. This is a picture of the Alps during those days. I mean, Europe was expanding, and people started living in areas where those days there was still a way to earn your living. And those are the areas that are now being abandoned. Marginal areas, low productive, and you see here these stone walls. People have worked for centuries to grow crops or to pick olives or to graze, to let animals graze. But the abandonment is happening as we speak. And we have asked the European Institute for Environmental Policy to do a study, and they expect that until 2030, another 18 million hectares of land will be abandoned. So we're talking about half to 1 million hectares a year, and 1 million hectares a year is actually the size of Belgium. So this is a big thing that is happening in Europe, and it will change the face of Europe. So young generations are leaving, and if you travel to Spain, in the villages, you find the average age of the people there 60, 70. A lot of young people left, and you don't see small children anymore. A lot of villages abandoned. And in terms of biodiversity, it has two faces, basically. In those areas where there's no grazing anymore, with all, which happened for centuries and even longer, we see young forests coming up. It's just becoming one young, big forest. And that, of course, has a big impact on biodiversity. I'll talk a little bit more about that. On the other hand, very fertile, very suitable areas for intensive agriculture are also losing biodiversity, as we know. And the country where I come from, in the Netherlands, it's so intensively used. If you go out in spring, you even don't hear skylarks anymore. So it's silent spring in parts of our agricultural areas. Species just don't survive anymore. And at the same time, we don't have scientific evidence, but we're working on it. But we believe that at least 50% of the species in Europe are linked to half-open landscapes. If you would take only the forest species, and then species that only live even during their entire life in forest, that's only a small percentage. A lot of species might live in forest for part of their life cycle, or go out at night, feed outside the forest. But the main biodiversity is in these half-open landscapes. So if this is going to happen in Europe, all this land abandonment, all the forest growth, then we will lose a lot of biodiversity. And personally, I think this is one of the biggest challenges of wild flora and fauna in Europe. So a lot of problems. And indeed, land abandonment is perceived as a problem because it has a huge social impact. There's no schools, there's no public services anymore. People are leaving. We have met mayors in the Romanian Carpathians say, well, the last 5 years, 50% of my people have left. People are desperate. And we have been thinking with a few people, and in fact it started in Sweden here, just north of Stockholm, Ulvsbomuren, beautiful place where a few people met and where we came with this idea. Can't we change this threat into an opportunity? And there's a few more opportunities in Europe which are very favorable and could help us to get to a paradigm shift, if you wish. Natura 2000, I think most of you must be familiar. Unique in the world. There's no other continent in the world that has designed this network of high biodiversity areas. And look at north of Sweden. It's huge. And of course, there's a big question. How do we implement this beautiful European policy? It costs a lot of money. And how are we going to manage this? But it's unique. It's an opportunity. So we should make use of that. The same in the EU, in the European Parliament. There was a resolution on wilderness accepted 2 years ago. There was a big conference on wilderness in Europe, so it comes on the agenda. It's coming on the agenda now, and there's attention to it also in the new biodiversity strategy for Europe, which needs to be accepted in European Parliament in April this year. There is room for restoration for rewilding initiatives. So maybe what a lot of people didn't expect is actually happening. There is a policy environment coming up in Europe on rewilding issues. So that's another opportunity. And then something everybody in Europe, I think, more or less is experiencing. There is a huge wildlife comeback happening. A lot of people are not aware of it. We have asked the Zoological Society of London to look at 100 species that have shown an increase, let's say, after the war, so from the 50s, 60s up to now, and really describe what has happened and what are the reasons for that comeback. And these are just a few examples here, but look what staggering figures we're looking at, like red deer, from 200,000 to 2.5 million. Look at the beaver. Is there a pointer? I think there's a pointer, yes. Whereas the beaver down here, from 700, was nearly extinct in Europe. And look at this, we nearly have 700,000 now. Of course, the wolf is showing a comeback and expanding its range, but this is just a small selection of species that is showing a wildlife comeback. And I have to say, this is against the background of ever-decreasing biodiversity index of Europe. So biodiversity in general is still going down, but a lot of species are showing a comeback. And it's very important, I think, for everybody, for all of us, to know what the reason for this is and what we can learn from it and how can we apply it in other places or other species. And just to give you some very early results of the grey wolf, for instance, here what you see here is in grey is the range, and let's say, oh, sorry, this is now going wrong. Back. The range in the 1800s, then you see how it has gone back in the red areas, and now the wolf is coming back. It's moving westwards. And even last year in Belgium and Holland, we had the first wolf sighting since 1855. Because of the wolf is expanding in Germany. And last year, Germany had 10 new wolf packs. So that's a serious development. And another one about is on the brown bear, where you can see there is, from the existing range, there is a serious expansion happening in Scandinavia, but also in parts of Central Europe. So this is really very exciting, and we can produce these maps for another 100 species, and this is a story that has not been told, and we're going to tell it, and hopefully the report is coming out later this year, where we're going to show and communicate about this very exciting development in Europe. Another opportunity, and that's where you know a lot about and where you're dealing with, there is an increasing demand for wildlife and wildlife watching in Europe. We have made a lot of species very shy. We've made them nocturnal instead of diurnal because the way we treat them and because of hunting pressure. But a lot of people like this positive emotion between an animal. If you walk in your garden, you see a beautiful butterfly, or if you're on holiday and you see a moose or anything, people like to see wild animals. This is in Berlin, where there's now 4,000 wild boar living in the city. I don't know about Stockholm, but this is pretty exciting. And you see that wild boar is not a shy animal if you leave it. Of course, it's causing problems as well, but it shows that there is serious interest. And what we would like to do is to expose average European citizens to wildlife again. So, a little of the backgrounds, a few very nice opportunities that all come together now, and I think that's where we have to make use of. So the initiative Rewilding Europe has developed a vision, which is basically making Europe a wilder place. That sounds very nice, very general, and of course we have worked that out in much more detail. But what it actually means is much more space for wildlife, wilderness, and natural processes, bringing back the variety of life for all of us to enjoy, as I said, but also exploring new ways for people to earn a living from wild life, wild lands, and wilderness. And of course, this will take a long time. We have said, let's run this initiative for at least a period of 10 years, but of course, rewilding itself takes much longer, depending where you are. In very productive systems, it can go very quickly along rivers, for instance, but in other parts, it takes much longer. But we have committed ourselves to work on this for a period of 10 years, and I would like to show you the first 5 project areas where we have started working. In fact, what we did is, in Prague 2 years ago, we presented our vision, and there was a conference on wilderness, and all the European countries were present. And we invited people, and we asked them, do you recognize this opportunity? Do you recognize the problems? And if you're interested, please come to us and nominate your area. And we got more than 20, now it's nearly 25 regions, areas of Europe, where people came to us and said, this is our future, this is what we should start working on. So what we did is we selected the first 5, the most promising ones, and I just give you a glimpse of where they are and how it looks like. So there's one big area on the border between Portugal and Spain, which could look like the Africa savanna, but these are actually oak trees, cork oak trees, which have been used for centuries and where people actually stopped using them. A huge opportunity for rewilding. The second one, the Danube Delta, Europe's most beautiful river delta, I would say. Incredible big marshes, reed beds, a riverine forest with pelican storks, lots of wildlife already, but a lot of species missing, and a lot of opportunity for rewilding. Eastern Carpathians on the border between Slovakia, Poland, and Ukraine. Already an area where there is bison, brown bear, wolf, lynx, lots of other exciting species. Potential for a big rewilding area of at least 270,000 hectares. And what we actually would like to do here is connect the river valleys where the wildlife comes in winter, but where they're shot now or not protected, with the forest higher up in the mountains, so that we get altitudinal migration again of those wildlife species, and of course beef up the numbers seriously. The Southern Carpathians in Romania, the last one, a huge and beautiful area. And Derek, you come from Yellowstone, but we call this the Yellowstone of Europe. And if you see this picture, but you know what is so surprising? Very little wildlife, incredibly, very little wildlife here. Oh, sorry, this is the last one. I forgot the last one. This is in Croatia, the 5th project, Velebit, which is a coastal area, completely overgrazed because there were millions of sheep and goat. And when there was a road built along the coast, and now probably a lot of you know that Croatia has a beautiful coast and millions of tourists go there, all the people that lived in the country left and went to the coast. And what you see is all the forest is coming up here. Huge area, potential for rewilding. Okay, so Rewilding Europe, as we have designed it, to give you a bit of a background, 3 key elements: conservation, communication, and business. And I would like to go through these with you shortly. We have said in those 5 areas, and ultimately 10 in 2013, we would like to announce the next 5 projects, all at least 100,000 hectares, so in total 1 million hectares, rewilded by 2020. That's our goal. And in those 10 areas, natural landscapes, natural processes shape the landscape. So it's not people cutting and shooting and mowing and pruning and anything we do in areas. It's nature itself that shapes the landscape. And this is very challenging because a lot of people, Europeans, are used and think we should manage nature. And we have lost trust in nature, that nature can do things by itself. And wouldn't it be exciting to have a few places in Europe where people are not managing nature, but where nature is actually managing itself? And let's see what happens. And that's why I would like to refer to the title of my talk, which is rediscovering European nature. There's no single place in Europe left where this is actually happening, and where an ecosystem is complete, where all the species are complete, where all the processes take place, so we don't actually know how it looks like. Isn't that very exciting? I think we're going to learn a lot when this takes shape. Natural grazing is a key natural process that is missing in many, many areas. Because of the land abandonment, livestock is sort of really going down very quickly now. And you see, as a result, all these areas become forested. Sorry. And so what we need the large herbivores, species that grazed Europe before people came, bring them back in big numbers. And that is a big challenge. Another natural process, or a number of natural processes we would like to give space to. Of course, there's natural fires, there is diseases like bark beetles, flooding, impact of ice, snow, storms, you name it. And if needed, in those areas where we see important key species are missing, we will reintroduce them. And what is very important that we realize that rewilding is not something far away from home. You could start rewilding your garden. We don't do that as Rewilding Europe, but instead of concrete or stones, you can put some nice plants, for instance. Or, but it really, what I want to say is that it doesn't matter where you actually apply this idea. Even the most beautiful national parks and protected areas in Europe need rewilding because things are missing, as I just said. Of course, that is not like, you have a nice reserve and put a fence around it. No, we're talking about open areas where there is a zoning, where you have core areas, where you have transition zones, where you have buffer zones, and that fitting within existing planning systems in those areas. So that's on the conservation side. If we want this to happen in Europe, we need to do very serious communication at all levels, from the local citizens, from the mayors in the areas, up to the people in the EU at the highest level. And Rewilding Europe teamed up with Wild Wonders of Europe to work on the communication strategy for the initiative. And one of the things that we've learned is really very important is to reach out to the general public. And those are, of course, the people in the countryside, but it's also about all these Europeans that live or are going to live in cities. And we have learned that these outdoor exhibitions have like between 500,000 and 2 million visitors each. And so far, exhibitions have been have taken place in The Hague and Prague and Copenhagen. And this year, there will be very likely Madrid, Berlin, and who knows, maybe Stockholm is an interesting one as well. So these exhibitions are very important because they act as icebreakers for a lot of communication and outreach. And in fact, this is the launch of the Wild Wonders exhibition in The Hague, just near our Parliament building. It was covered in actually all media in the country that day. So they act really as icebreakers, and from there you can start doing lots of other things. And our plan is in all the countries where we have projects to also have these big outdoor exhibitions. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, so that modern communications tools where we hope to also interest a lot of young Europeans to share ideas and become part of our network. So far, we had already quite some publicity. Most recently, we're very excited. Big cover story, 24 or 28 pages in Geo, now being published in 12 different countries, talking about the rewilding of Europe and the opportunities I'm explaining here to you. Well, then the third part, which is actually the main theme, I guess, of today, is the business development side. If we say to people, maybe we should move from marginal, subsidized agricultural use to more a servicing economy where economic activities are based on wilderness and wildlife, then we also need to make sure that we push and help and support business development based on that. So that's the third cornerstone of Rewilding Europe. And we've teamed up with Conservation Capital, which is a UK-based organization exactly doing that, with a lot of experience in Africa, by the way. And what is very important that those enterprises that we will support from Rewilding Europe point of view are really in support of rewilding. So it's directly or indirectly. Of course, you can think of a lot of economic activities that are just exploiting the natural capital. But what we want is that there is a feedback into the conservation and rewilding of those areas. Wildlife watching tourism, it's at an infant stage. There is a lot happening already, from the bears in Finland to the eagles in Norway and the whale watching, but still at a very low scale. And we think if we will have more wildlife, then there is big opportunity for wildlife watching tourism all over Europe. So the question is really, where will be the first safari lodges in Europe? Job creation in those areas where there is land abandoned, where people are leaving because there's no work. Entrepreneurship are at the core of our business component. There's a few innovative business mechanisms we are developing, and one of the things is we're talking with banks to start up a Rewilding Europe investment fund, where those businesses that apply to the criteria and conditions I just mentioned briefly are receptive for investments from banks, and there's 2 banks already very interested in this, so we hope that we can start quite soon with some first examples here. And another one is a European Wildlife Bank. If we want to beef up the wildlife numbers in Europe, we need to find ways of doing that. And we actually made a business case out of building herds of animals, which are being put in areas, and where the people that manage that area have to give back half of the herds after 5 years. And normally, then the herd is tripled because you have an annual growth rate about 20–30%, and those animals are being used and put into other areas. Or if that area becomes bigger, of course, we leave those areas there. That has been tested in the Netherlands, but also in Latvia and in Bulgaria. A very interesting mechanism for people to increase wildlife numbers. There's only one graph in my presentation which I would like to show you here, and this has to do with at what stage is it more profitable to change land use from agriculture, forestry, subsidized or not, towards wildlife and using let's say, the indigenous species systems. And if you look at this graph, you see productivity. So here we're talking about very low productivity, here very high productivity, and these are the returns or the benefits of those systems. And I believe that in those low productivity systems, there is a better income and benefit from indigenous species systems than from exotic species, like species that are being used in agriculture, compared to areas with a high productivity, where you see that exotic species system overrule the indigenous species systems. And but what is happening in reality is that in these areas, because of all kinds of policy interventions, it could be hunting, forestry, it could be agriculture, you see that because of policies, the value of those indigenous species is put down. And at the same time, subsidies increase or drive up the exotic species. So even in marginal areas, you see that because of EU subsidies, Pillar 2 subsidies, where farmers are being paid to mow grasslands, and they just put the mow in the edge of the forest, there's no economic value of it, you see that system changes. And I think what we're talking about, if we talk about a paradigm shift, is moving away from those subsidies and increase or improve our policies for indigenous species, so that the balance gets right again, and so that there is an incentive for people to start developing wildlife watching, wildlife enterprises, and so on. Okay, so some conclusions. I think I've shown that because of land abandonment, because of wildlife comeback, because of interest of people to experience wilderness and wildlife, because of EU policy, there is a historic opportunity in Europe for rewilding. We need to beef up the numbers of herbivores, both for grazing, but also to improve the prey base. There's a lot of carnivores that depend on these species, and if the species levels are so low in many areas, of course carnivores have problems. They go for livestock or other prey, and so this would greatly help to improve the prey base for carnivores as well. And of course those carnivores themselves play a key role in ecosystems. Recently there have been some very important studies being done about trophical cascading, the role of predators, top predators in these ecosystems, and how they actually create space for other species in the food chain. Some new insights. But they're also, of course, very important economic drawcards when it comes to wildlife tourism. if you ask anybody, any presentation I do ask, so who would like to see a wolf during holiday? You know, if you have time and you go out for half a day or a day, I think everybody raises his hand. Yeah, I would like to see a wolf in the wild, and not in the zoo. So there is huge potential there. So there is a business case for wildlife watching industry in Europe, but still at an infant stage. We're just starting, really. But I think the conclusion from my story would be that it can be a competitive form of land use in Europe in many areas. And that's what we are trying to set up. Partnerships are key. We have a number of partnerships. Well, first of all, the initiating partners, WWF Netherlands, Wild Wonders of Europe, ARC, which is a Dutch-based conservation organization, Conservation Capital, our business partner. We are working with a number of European partners, but of course very important are the local partners who are actually running those projects. Local ownership and leadership are very key. There is nothing, it won't work if it will be a sort of European initiative that says, well, this is a good area and that is a good area. What we have turned it around, we've asked people, please, if you see interest, come to us. It's your project. We will support you and we will help you in many ways as much as we can, but you have to do it. And then within a network set up, we think that is a good formula. And we have a growing team. Now we have already quite a few countries in our initiative, all the project people and the people in the Rewilding Europe team itself. And we think we'll grow quickly. So that is really nice, and I have to say that a lot of young people in all these European countries are very interested and are really looking for new solutions in their areas where they grew up or where they were born. So the question is, any opportunities in Sweden? This is a map I got from a Swedish colleague, I don't mention his name here, showing that a lot of areas in Europe, in Sweden, sorry, are being abandoned. There's a lot of, I think between 2007 and 2010, there was like a 20% decrease in the number of full-time farmers in Sweden. And you see the red areas here, which are being abandoned, and the blue areas where the population is increasing. Well, that's not different from all these other European countries. So maybe there are some rewilding opportunities in Sweden, and I'm sure you will discuss, so we will discuss this more during the day. Well, I would not like to end without saying that apart from a few funders you see here from Dutch origin, there's also now the Swedish lottery supporting Rewilding Europe. We're very excited about it, and we hope to grow our financial support more during the coming years. So we'd like to thank you, and we're looking forward to interesting discussions.
Thank you, Franz Schäper. It sounds wonderful. It sounds like you're saving Europe. Have you called Angela Merkel or Nicolas Sarkozy?
Yeah, when Angela Merkel here talks about Europe becoming a wilder place, probably she means something different. But anyway, yeah, we're just starting. But we had a very good start, and we really hope that a lot of countries are going to join and come with ideas. And even if not possible as part of our 10 projects, you know, start smaller rewilding initiatives, and the time is there. So what should we?
Have you any actual example you can mention? Just something happening today.
Well, in our projects, for instance,
yes.
Yeah, there was a place where red deer was completely gone, and starting to reintroduce red deer back again into those areas. And so we have these 5 projects starting last year. Well, in fact, 3 and 2 just started. And the interesting thing is that it's all done and led by local NGOs. It's not government, of course, they cooperate with local partners, municipalities, government, business partners, but it's in fact local NGOs, people that organize non-governmental organizations that start these projects and have set their agenda, and we have signed 3-year contracts with them now to start up. So yeah, it's very exciting to see the shift in thinking, and also the shift in acting, you know, how to use land.
But it seems like the future is very bright. No problems at all.
Of course not. No, we'll have many challenges, and I think we have a huge learning curve. You know, how things work, and how we can adopt and adapt ideas from other parts of the world, and see how this works in a European context. Of course, there's a lot of challenges, but I think it's very exciting. There's a lot of support for it so far, and a lot of energy with a lot of people to make this happen. So we go for it, so to speak.
Of course, as Swedes, we're interested if something is happening here. If somebody has nominated, I've heard that you got some suggestions concerning Sweden, and maybe you're going to cooperate with Ekoturistföreningen. Is that correct?
Yeah, who knows? But I think there's people in the room here who know more about it. But
Ulf Lovén, he's the man.
Yeah, and
what's happening? What's up?
Yeah, there he's coming. Ulf.
Jag kan bara ge en kort kommentar att absolut, vi i Ekoturistföreningen har fått möjligheten att ta initiativet att ta fram några kandidater till den här andra vändan utav kvalificering. The opportunity to bring forward candidates from Sweden of suggested large areas that might be possible to have improvement from Rewilding Europe as rewilding areas in the northern parts of Europe. So that's a work that is undergoing right now, and we will communicate
exciting
later this year.
Would be exciting.
Yeah. Do you think Sweden have a chance to be one of
I think so. I think so. We have a few very good nominations lined up.
Yeah.
And so during the course of this year, we will look at them and make a sort of pre-selection, and then we'll do very detailed feasibility studies. So actually visit all the places, look at what is the starting situation there, and then
so when you're knocking on the door, we should open the door and be very happy.
And we will announce them next year in October. There will be the World Wilderness Conference. Will be in Spain, in Salamanca, very close to our area, and we will announce the next 5. So who knows? Sweden is part of it. So you have to work hard.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you so much, Frank Schepers. If anyone has questions, we'll have a coffee break in a while, and we might see you on stage.
Thank you
again. Thank you so much. Thank you.